Coming up on this week's episode of TechSnap, authentic iOS apps can get replaced with malware, the US Postal Service gets breached, and Microsoft has a hot mess of critical patches. Then it's a great big batch of your questions, a rockin' roundup, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSnap. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSnap. This is episode 188 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We stream this episode live on November 13th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, DigitalOcean, Ting, and IX Systems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Our live stream, why, that's powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. You should probably go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
For the 188th time in a row, I might add. Hello there, Alan. Hey, so turns out big show today. How did that happen? Lots going on this week. It does. I know. We have no excuse. It's just that's like default now. It's average show, except for every average show is such a big show. So you know me, I've recently been experimenting with the iOS side of things. I got an iPhone on Ting a little while ago. I put iOS 8 on it. I think it's a pretty good OS. Seems to have decent consumer-grade security. But our first story, Alan, I'm a little disappointed, methinks. But it's funny because...
Yeah, when you link this to me, and then we get hit with the stuff we talked about last week, I was just like... Bleh.
Right, I mean, we kind of speculated in the post-show last week that, guys, this seems like something that could be taken advantage of. In fact, we have a feedback to that effect as well. But so they're calling it the mask attack, and this is coming from FireEye. Tell me what's going on.
Yes. So last week we talked about a new malware for OS X that when you plugged an iOS device into it would infect it with malicious applications. And those, particularly at that time, were targeting a Chinese app store that sold pirated apps.
Right.
And it would replace popular pirated apps with malware. And we're like, part of the reason that was able to happen is because the apps were signed with a digital certificate that was trusted by Apple. It turns out what Apple has is this system where a company that wants to deploy apps for their employees, like to have an internal application, can get it trusted so that instead of having to go through the regular review process of getting it put in the Apple Store, because you don't want people outside your company using the app anyway.
No, it's for a few employees.
Right. So they have this whole enterprise deployment strategy thing, and basically you can get a certificate, then use it to sign your applications and push those out to the iPhones that are enrolled in your company. The problem is the way it works is that because that certificate that marks your corporation as trusted is signed by the Apple certificate, which is trusted by every iPhone, that means my phone, which has nothing to do with your company, trusts apps signed by your company.
And you can almost guess how this starts. Like Apple's like, well, we'll just take the system we designed for the App Store and we'll give this to our enterprise customers, and it saves them a bunch of work.
A subordinate certificate of the Apple one rather than doing a separate one
for each one.
Where, like the way it works in Windows Active Directory is the domain controller, like there's a certificate for your domain and it's trusted by every client that joins the domain, which is how it should have been done for the Apple one, is the corporations should, when your phone enrolls in that corporation as part of their enterprise deployment profile, it would then trust that corporate certificate.
That's right.
But because Apple signed the corporate certificate with their certificate, which is already trusted by every phone, means my phone that has nothing to do with your company now trusts your app.
Mm-hmm.
And then some Chinese company had their corporate app, corporate certificate hacked, and then signed a bunch of malware.
Yeah.
Or rather, it might have been the malware authors just got Apple to sign a certificate. It wasn't exactly clear there.
Not like Apple's going to make that super clear either.
Yeah. Anyway, part of the problem was that those corporate certificates trusted everything. So we suspected that this could be actually a fairly major vulnerability in the architecture of iOS, because they can't just change how that works now. But it turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg. So back in July, FireEye mobile security researchers discovered that an iOS app installed using the enterprise or ad hoc provisioning profile could replace a genuine app installed through the Apple App Store as long as both apps use the same bundle identifier, which is just that string, like, com.google.gmail.
Mm-hmm.
So this in-house app may display an arbitrary title like "New Flappy Bird" or "New Angry Birds" or something that would make people want to install it. But then the app replaces a genuine app after you install it. So in their example, which you can see on their website, they actually make a fake Angry Birds app that they push out, and so the user says, "Oh, sure, I'll install that."
Yeah.
And what it actually does is replace the Gmail app on your phone and steal your Gmail password.
And in this example, they're sending the user like a Bitly link via the text message system.
Yeah. And when you click on the website, "Hey, install this app," and it's got a name. "Oh, sure, I'll try that." And what it actually does is replace your Gmail client. So all apps can be replaced except for the iOS pre-installed apps like Mobile Safari. The vulnerability exists because the OS doesn't enforce matching certificates for apps with the same bundle identifier.
Wow, so this is interesting too, Alan. When they replace the Gmail app in this example, you do see the Gmail icon getting replaced, but then after it's replaced, it actually puts the notification badges back on the icon, so it looks like the app is telling you, "Click on me, I have some notifications for you."
Yep.
Those must be system side. Yeah, so now it's asking them to sign into Gmail.
Yep. This means that the malicious app signed by a random corporate certificate issued by Apple, which is supposed to be only for internal use, but is trusted by every iPhone anyway, can replace any application on your phone except for the ones that come directly from Apple. Because, they check that there is a certificate for anything with that identifier. They don't actually check that the app claiming to have that identifier matches the certificate that makes it trusted. Mm-hmm. It's not enough checking done by Apple there in iOS.
This is similar to their Messages app in iOS. So in Messages, if you had an iPhone and I had an iPhone and I sent you a message, our clients negotiate that encryption, which is neat. However, they at that point then no longer check each other's certificates. So if you swap it out, there's no verification or alert that it's been swapped out. Or if something else if another key gets added to that conversation, there's no notification of that.
Yep.
It's sort of like this assumed trust. Well, it's running on our system, it's running on our platform, our hardware. We just trust it.
Yep. They also say an attacker can leverage this vulnerability both through wireless networks and USB. They can embed a link to an app in a website, or they can, like this vulnerability, the original WireLurker thing, they could infect a phone when you connect it over USB without your approval and all kinds of problems. If you install New Flappy Bird on your phone or connect your iOS device to an infected computer or a malicious charging port at like an airport or lots of places now have phone charging stations, right? And we've seen before that, you're connecting over USB or Thunderbird or Thunderbolt or some other thing like that. It can also show up as a computer instead, right? And do things to your phone. Or use untrusted Wi-Fi that has man in the middle or whatever. And then all of a sudden your Twitter app on your device gets replaced with a malware one that steals your credentials and starts tweeting spam. Or worse, the guys at FireEye tried this out and they said that the attacker can steal users' bank credentials by replacing an authentic banking app with malware that has an identical UI, and then basically it's a phishing attack. Surprisingly, the malware can even access the original app's local storage data, which wasn't removed when the original app was replaced. These data may contain cached emails or login tokens, which the malware can then use to log into the user's account directly.
So that must have been where it got the notification badge indicator.
Yeah, and a bunch of... So, like... If you have drafts or something in your Gmail and it replaces a Gmail app, it can see the draft emails and then upload them to the bad guys.
Wow.
And also, for example, if your Gmail has a token stored there to let you log in without needing to prompt for your credentials again,
yeah, right.
They can do that. So they can make it log in, steal all your emails that you have in your inbox and send them off to the bad guys, and then later, some other time, prompt you to log in. So they can steal your username and password to get future stuff. That way, the event of you installing the malicious app and when you get prompted to relog into Gmail are far enough apart, you don't make the connection. So FireEye originally shared this information with Apple back in July, but after the news about WireLurker came out, because WireLurker uses the same but a very limited form of this attack,
right?
Like they're only attacking pirated App Store stuff, not real App Store stuff.
Right.
It's likely the attackers might not have realized that they could have done this against legitimate apps too, right? they might not have realized how big of a problem they had stumbled onto. They just found something that worked and went with it. So FireEye felt it was necessary to go public with the information so customers can take steps to protect themselves.
Yeah, and they have some mitigation.
They have some instructions on there on things to watch out for. And they also say, as mentioned in their Virus Bulletin 2014 paper, apps distributed using enterprise provisioning profiles aren't subjected to Apple's review process. So an enterprise can write an app that does whatever. Therefore, the attacker can leverage iOS private APIs for powerful attacks such as background monitoring and to mimic iCloud's UI and steal a user's Apple ID and password as well. Right? Normally, an app that goes in the App Store gets checked by Apple and make sure it doesn't use any of the, root level system stuff. But an enterprise app can do whatever it wants on your phone because it doesn't get checked by Apple and then gets signed with a trusted certificate.
Right, and you can see. And we'll also have a note about this from the developer's perspective in the feedback segment. So that's an aside. But you can see what Apple has done here, right? They responded to customer demand saying, "Apple, you've got to load this up. If you want the iPhone to do well in enterprise, we have to be able to provision our own custom apps, right? Just like companies want to roll their own custom intranets, etc." And of course,
but allowing that is perfectly fine. Sure. But they just did it wrong because
this is where my criticism
comes in. My phone
shouldn't
shouldn't trust your company.
So it really seems to me when it comes to security, whenever it's something that Apple isn't really all in on, they really half-ass it. And this doesn't surprise me at all. And the thing is, there is a lot of stuff like built around this now, and there is multiple generation of devices out in the enterprise. Because you might be thinking about this in context of iPhones, but another way this is used in a really big way is iPads, where you have entire hospitals where the medical staff are equipped with iPads, and they're deploying custom apps to those iPads to interface with the hospital's database backend or whatever it might be. That would never go in the App Store. That would never get approved by Apple because there's no way it would meet Apple's guidelines ever. But they don't need it to, right? They just need to deploy it to the 500 to 1,000 iPads they have in that facility. But if you go and change this on them, well, I mean, enterprise customers hate that. So they're kind of in a tough spot now. Yeah,
well, it's actually worse. They kind of took away some of your ability to so to check whether there are apps already installed using the mask attack, iOS 7 users can check their enterprise provisioning profiles installed on their iOS device, which indicate the signing identities of possible malware delivered via the mask attack.
Right.
So if you go Settings, General Profiles, and look for Provisioning Profiles, iOS 7 users can report suspicious provisioning profiles to the security department or whatever. But you can see a list of the companies your phone is trusting and what apps have been installed by them.
That's nice.
And if you see anything weird, you can report it. But
okay.
Deleting a provisioning profile will prevent enterprise-signed apps which rely on that specific profile from running. However, iOS 8 devices don't show provisioning profiles already installed on devices, and therefore you have to audit your apps manually.
Eric points out, too, in the chat room that iPads are popular in avionics and pilots and all these areas.
Yep.
So this is an interesting problem, and I guess so. If any iPhone user, even if you're not associated with an enterprise, could be affected by this.
It seems, yes.
That's quite bad.
They have some mitigation steps listed here. So it says iOS users can protect themselves from the mask attacks by following the following 3 steps. 1. Don't install apps from third-party sources other than Apple's official App Store or your own enterprise organization if it's a company phone or whatever. Don't click install on a pop-up from a third-party website. As shown in Figure 1C, they have a picture of an untrusted app developer. Do you want to allow it? No matter what the pop-up says about the app, because this is just whatever the author wrote in the description, it doesn't actually get checked by Apple that what they wrote is legitimate about it, right? So it's like, oh, this is the new Angry Birds. And it's like, no, it's not. The pop-up can show attractive app titles crafted by the attacker. And then finally, number 3, when opening an app, if iOS shows an alert for untrusted app developer, as shown in this figure, to click on Don't Trust and uninstall the app immediately.
Okay. Well, there you go. There you go. Yeah. I don't even know what to do with that, Alan. And I suppose Apple will probably have a statement about it in a week or so.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll craft a couple of fixes. Like they can definitely fixed the bug that allows somebody to replace Gmail's app with a malicious app and your phone not detect that.
Yeah, that would be.
So hopefully there'll be an iOS update at some point. Although, we've seen it's not always very quick for them to update.
Yeah. And because they kind of have in cycles, and Apple also has like a really screwed up holiday schedule, like where at the end of November they give like most of their staff, except for the retail, like a week off, and then you have Christmas after that. So it's going to be, anyways. We'll keep following it, and if there's any updates, we'll probably toss it in the roundup or something like that. Hey, Alan, I want to just stop here real quick and tell everybody about DigitalOcean. Head over to DigitalOcean.com, and then put this in the back of your mind after I tell you about DigitalOcean. But I want you to remember this because it's going to get you a great deal. Snap November. One word. Lowercase. Snap November. So what is DigitalOcean? Go check them out. You can browse their site. They have a bunch of great information up there. But put straightforwardly, DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting provider that is dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way for you to spin up a cloud server. And that really means you're going to get started as fast as possible. It doesn't if you know how to spin up a virtual machine, then you appreciate the ease and speed at which you can do it. And if you've never done it before, you find it's really not a challenge at all. And you can get started probably less than 55 seconds, and pricing plans start at only $5 per month. You'll get 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, one CPU, and a terabyte of transfer for $5. Now, if you use the promo code, that Snap November promo code, one word, well, then they'll give you a $10 credit. That $10 credit's going to get you the $5 rig 2 months for free. Here's what I would do. Go have some fun, and then you'll discover after you use the performance, after you've actually just had it online for a while and you have a little bit of a taste of some of the flexibility or maybe the one-click applications, you'll probably move it into production. We had on Tuesday's Linux Unplugged, Wimpy, who was releasing a new release of the Ubuntu 14.04 Mate edition. He did it live on the show, and he, using DigitalOcean as the back-end infrastructure, pushed about 16 gigabytes in just seconds. I mean, he pushed all the ISOs out, all the different versions, and we did it live on air. I mean, it was glorious. And, it was really thanks to just the raw horsepower, those SSD drives, the Tier 1 bandwidth, and DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, and London. So you have some great locations. And then there's that interface. It's just super intuitive. And power users can replicate the interface on a larger scale with DigitalOcean's straightforward API, and there's a lot of good stuff out there. And DigitalOcean's also hoping maybe you'll help them write a tutorial. If you've got something you know how to do, and you have a little time to write something up, you can work with one of the DigitalOcean editors, and they'll possibly pay you up to $200 for writing for DigitalOcean. And on top of that, they've gotten such good demand from that they also now have an editor's position open at DigitalOcean. So if you maybe have like some experience with this, or if this is kind of your bag and you'd like to work for DigitalOcean, use the link on our show notes, head over to their website, and maybe apply for the job. They've been getting some great response, and as a result, DigitalOcean now has some of the best community tutorials out there. I mean, they really are getting just better and better, and they're adding more and more. And it's been so successful for them, they're doubling down on it and hiring additional editors. And maybe you could be one of them. If nothing else, you might be able to get paid for writing a tutorial. So head over to DigitalOcean.com. Use the promo code SNAPNovember when you check out. Get that $10 credit. It applies it to the account, and then you don't have to worry about running out, because they'll just have it right in there. And if you have a balance in there, they'll give you additional credits on top of that too. It's a really cool system. That's my preferred way to pay for these kinds of things, and I like their interface to it as well, because everything's slick. DigitalOcean.com, promo code SNAPNovember when you check out. I really shouldn't say when you check out, but it's a really hard habit to drop.
Yes.
All right, Alan. So this next story sounds like a massive, massive debacle. And perfect for, we just wrapped up National Cybersecurity Month too, so it's kind of a good punctuation.
Yeah, during National Cybersecurity Month, it turns out.
Yeah, what happened to the US Postal Service?
Apparently their internal network was compromised, and they had to shut down the VPN that people use to telecommute to work.
Womp womp.
Attackers compromised the internal network of the United States Postal Service. It's not clear how they actually got in. They're being very low detail on what they're releasing so far.
Yeah.
Although there was mention of a call center being compromised, and the fact that they shut down the VPN and had to upgrade it before they could bring it back up suggests the problem might have been the VPN. Mm-hmm. They say the compromised information could include the employee's name, date of birth, social security number, address, beginning and ending dates of employment, emergency contact information, and other information.
So this is not
And
of
this is
U.S. citizens.
This is 800,000 employees of the Postal Service.
Okay.
Separately, the intrusion also compromised call center data for customers who contacted the Postal Service Customer Care Center with an inquiry via telephone or email between January 1st and August 16th of 2014. So it seems that they shut down the exploit on August 16th, and
probably
they didn't report it until just now.
Yeah,
now,
National
they say they
Cybersecurity.
discovered it during September, but didn't tell anybody. Or something, they definitely took a while to tell people.
Well, you got to hold it for the big event.
Yeah, and the compromised data for regular customers includes name, address, telephone number, email address, and any other information you might have given the customer care representatives while you were talking to them.
Okay.
Because it only has name, address, telephone number, and email address, at this time, we do not believe the potentially affected customers need to take any actions as a result of this incident. Whereas the 800,000 employees get free credit monitoring from Experian, the company that sells your data to the identity thieves in bulk.
Yeah, that'll be great. That's great. Thanks,
and
Experian.
they're like, oh, what if I want it for more than a year? It's like, yeah, you can pay for it.
Oh, go ahead. Have at it. Yeah, have at it.
Like, Experian must be making so much money just because they get companies to pay them to, So Home Depot and Target and all these places paying to give a year of Experian.
This is
and then some customers will keep paying for it after.
This has got to be this has got to be one of the biggest booms for them. Just this whole mess.
If I had known, I would have started an identity theft protection company 10 years ago.
And even if
bloody rich,
Alan, even if people don't keep the service, every breach is an ad for Experian, because their name.
Not just that, but Home Depot is paying Experian for all the customers.
Yeah.
They get a discount, but still, you're getting every time somebody gets hacked, you get money.
But I would like to know if maybe Home Depot later on gets a residual, maybe after the year mark.
I doubt it. I very much doubt it.
I hope they don't, because if they're making money off that,
it wouldn't be enough. Home Depot estimates they'll lose $75 million over having the breach.
Oh, good.
Part of that is paying Experian. Part of that is paying for lawyers and PR people.
Yeah, and at least $2,500 of that is to buy some new IT equipment. So
yeah. Well, we actually have more detail about the Home Depot breach in the roundup at the bottom.
In the roundup. Okay.
So other stuff here via postalreporter.com.
Okay.
VPN was identified as vulnerable to this type of intrusion and will remain unavailable as we work to make modifications to this type of remote access to our network.
Oh.
When VPN is available again, users will be notified or users will notice changes in functionality. We will have additional information about the VPN in the near future. So the VPN either won't be able to do as much, or they're switching VPN software entirely.
Yeah. Maybe it was Heartbleed, Alan.
Well, specifically, you remember we heard about a company getting hacked because of Heartbleed. Basically, the VPN, somebody ran Heartbleed against the VPN server and stole some usernames and passwords. Then the company patched their VPN server, but they didn't change the password, so the attackers were able to keep coming back for months and stealing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's possible that could have been what happened here. Because even if they had patched it, they might not have known that their VPN was vulnerable to SSL and didn't patch it, or, the vendor's gone out of business and they couldn't patch it or whatever. Or they did patch it, but the attackers had stolen usernames and passwords first. And, if they don't force a change on everybody's username and password, then somebody could still got in. However, the most alarming part of this whole FAQ that they put out about for employees is this question. Should I change my Ace ID and password, or my postal employee identification number, or other portal passwords as a result of this incident? And it's, at this time, there's no requirement to change your password or other passwords unless prompted to do so by email prompts from IT.
What?
So don't change your password. If we need you to change your password, we'll email you.
How about just always advise, change your password. How about let's just always make that the standard advice. Change your password.
Yeah. You'll be notified if other password changes are required. So having IT ask you via email to change your password seems like a really bad idea. Right? This is just a great opening for a phishing campaign.
Well, yeah. And it sets a horrible precedent for expecting those kinds of communications over email from your IT department.
Right, the whole nobody from this company will ever ask you for your
Right.
password via an email.
We will never ask you for your credit card information. All that kind of
Right.
stuff.
Instead, what we will do is send you a link via email that you click on and you type in your old password and your new password twice.
Yeah.
And now we have your username and your old password.
Yeah.
And we didn't actually change your password. We just stole all your passwords.
God, that would work so well in so many organizations.
Exactly.
Especially with crap like this being the precedent.
Right. The password change, if a password change is required, it should be prompted for in a more trustworthy source than an email. I was thinking, the VPN system, like Windows. When you go to log into Windows and your password's expired,
it's
exactly. Like as soon as you log in, it's like, hey, pick a new password.
Right.
The problem with that is if you know passwords are already been compromised, then you don't want the attacker to log in with the old password and be able to type in a new password.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is the problem. And then the user doesn't know what the hell their password is anymore.
Exactly. So then you could have IT reset all the passwords and email out the new passwords or something, but that's not very good either.
No.
And I understand it's not an easy thing to solve.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely say have everybody change their passwords and maybe not allow any remote password changing.
Gosh, the whole reason they might just be saying no is just to avoid the tech support calls.
Exactly. Or just how many people will change their password and not remember the new one.
Yeah.
And I understand that's a big problem, but so is having every employee's social security number stolen. So,
wow.
You say you care about your customers' and employees' privacy, and then there's what you actually do about it.
Yep. Very good. All right, Alan. Any other thoughts on that one?
I'm saying after a breach, out of an abundance of caution, all passwords should be changed. Always. No questions.
Yes. Underscore.
Like, that's
given.
Not asking that much, honestly.
I know. All right. Well, I'll tell you what else isn't that much. That's my Ting bill. Head over to techsnap.ting.com. Techsnap.ting.com. That lets them know you appreciate them supporting the TechSnap show. But it'll also get you $25 off your first Ting device. And there's a couple of devices I want to point out that are sweet. I'll talk about that in just a second. But first, what is Ting? My friends, Ting is mobile that makes sense. And finally, it's mobile with no contract, no early termination, and you only pay for what you use. That, combined with Ting's customer service and their dashboard, it is such an awesome combination. So it's $6 for the line. That's what you pay, flat $6, and then they just do the usage on top of that. If you got to have multiple phones because you're a boss, you can have multiple phones, family style. Doesn't matter how many lines you want. You're a small business, that's actually a great way to go. Ting is excellent for small businesses. We use it here at Jupiter Broadcasting. 3 lines, around $45 a month. We're pretty savvy with our phone usage, so that makes it super great for us. We have hotspot and tethering on every single device, so when somebody goes out in the field, they got connectivity. We go down to a conference, we got that connectivity. And Ting's been rolling out tri-band LTE to even more cities, so that means even better speeds when we do go out on the roads. Here in the studio, 18 megabits down. It's great, and that's on my Nexus 5, techsnap.ting.com. Go check them out. No-hold customer service. Call them 1-855-TING-FTW. Anytime between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And a real human being in Canada answers that phone. They solve that problem. TechSnap.ting.com. Go there to get started. Then go check out some of their devices. They just added the HTC One M8, which is like the Cadillac phone. This is, I know the Nexus 6 is out, but you know what Nexus 6 don't have? Front-facing speakers. And if you're a podcast listener, and I think you might be, that's a game changer. At least it was for me. This is something else, though. On the lower-end, more budget side, I love this phone, though. It's the Kyocera Dual XT. It's a $44 rugged phone. It's got a basic web browser. It has a basic camera. But that's not the point, right? It's a ruggedized, basic make phones. It's got Bluetooth, voice dialing, speakerphone, and a camera.
It's for people that break their phones.
And it's for somebody who just needs a phone.
Right, but the ruggedized part is, if you're the type of person that scratches or cracks your phone all the time, you want something like this that's not going to suffer from little knocks.
I like this phone though. I like the look of it, and they got that big speaker on there too, so that means the ringer is going to be nice and loud, and it's got a nice clock on the front. I just think that's a great way to go, and it's the Kyocera Dura XT, and you can find that over in the Ting site. Go to techsnap.ting.com, and they have the shop site. Here's my phone, the Nexus 5. This is a great phone, and Android L is rolling out to the Nexus 5 devices right now, and Android L is solidly without question, in my opinion, for me, the best release of Android I've ever used. And I got it on Ting right now. It's great. TechSnap.ting.com. Save yourself some money. Only pay for what you use. Try out their savings calculator and see what I've been talking about. If you have any questions, call them. 1-855-TING-FTW. TechSnap.ting.com. And a huge thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSnap program. Okay, Alan. So I know that I think did you and I get a chance to discuss this OLE vulnerability that Microsoft? Did we mention this in the roundup at all, or
we mentioned it as a top story on episode 185.
Look at you! You always with the knowing, Alan. I'm so impressed. All right, so we actually have some updates and important maybe fixes. I don't know.
Yeah, particularly this is Microsoft released a patch for Patch Tuesday that solves some of the problems.
Yay! All right, what do we got?
So as part of this month's Patch Tuesday, Microsoft released its official patch for both the OLE vulnerabilities, the one that could be attack you via a website and the one that was via Office documents, that were used by the Sandworm team to attack NATO and a bunch of other government agencies, like we discussed in episode 185.
I remember that.
So this patch, MS14-064, replaces the old patch from October's Patch Tuesday, MS14-060. So there you have a summary here of there's like 16 major patches that came out for Patch Tuesday. Some of the interesting ones are obviously the 064 that fixes the OLE vulnerabilities. There's also an interesting one here, MS14-070. A user with local access, so anybody that can log into a computer, can use a specially crafted TCP/IP application to gain remote code execution with administrator privileges.
Heyo.
So I can take over your box and install whatever I want on it by connecting to a certain port and basically sending stuff into the TCP/IP stack that doesn't...
Yeah, and this is separate from the S-channel vulnerability.
Yes, and separately, there's also the S-channel vulnerability, which is affecting the way Microsoft does SSL and TLS.
So these are the type of bugs where you send the wrong kind of traffic to the box and you own it.
Exactly. Basically, if you set certain flags on a socket as you're writing data to it, it can cause the data to be misinterpreted, and the operating system will run it instead of doing what it was supposed to do with it. So that one, although requires actual local access to the machine.
Sure, yeah.
Although, if you could do it by a Trojan or something that lets you get on the person's computer and run a program, and then use that to get to the administrative level.
Yeah.
So the exploit requires some level of local access, although you could chain it with another vulnerability or something like the OLE one to get to there. They also have the S-channel one. There's one in the XML thing where if you use the MS XML thing in Internet Explorer, which was, at least in the past, a popular way to do JSON, then you could, if you put invalid XML into that, it could corrupt the state of the XML thing and let you do evil things. There is... apparently, they're actually sitting on a release, too. I see MS14-068 isn't actually be released yet.
Yeah.
They're still sitting on that one. Huh. That's interesting. But 69 there is allow remote code execution from Microsoft Office. 70 is the TCP/IP one. 71 is privilege escalation via the Windows audio service. 72 is a vulnerability in .NET could allow privilege escalation. SharePoint Foundation could allow privilege escalation.
Wow.
Vulnerability in remote desktop protocol could allow security feature bypass. 075, also not released yet. 076, vulnerability in IIS, which is a Microsoft web server, could allow security feature bypass. 77 is vulnerability in Active Directory Federation service, could allow information disclosure. Vulnerability in IME, which is a Japanese thing, could allow privilege escalation. And vulnerability in kernel mode driver could allow denial of service.
Wow. That is a hot mess.
Yeah. Also, they released a cumulative update for Internet Explorer that fixed 16 bugs in Internet Explorer. However, this patch breaks compatibility with the Enhanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit 5.0. Customers are instructed to upgrade to EMET 5.1 before they install this week's Patch Tuesday.
Wow, this is a classic mess. This is bad.
Yeah. If you're using Internet Explorer 11, either on Windows 7 or Windows 8.1, and have deployed EMET 5.0, it is particularly important to install EMET 5.1, as compatibility issues were discovered with November's Internet Explorer security update and the or EAF plus mitigation, although you can manually turn that mitigation off if you not ready to upgrade to EMET 5.1 or whatever. Although the newer EMET 5.1 also increases compatibility with Firefox and a bunch of other important applications as well.
Wow.
And then, we already mentioned the Microsoft patched a remote code execution vulnerability in Microsoft Secure Channel, or S Channel, which is how they implement SSL and TLS.
Yeah.
Also, and then we get to the second half of the story. So this OLE vulnerability, obviously there was a patch a month ago for it.
Remind me, object link. What's the E stand for? Extensibility?
It's about embedded.
But it's how, like, if you've ever seen a Word document that has like a spreadsheet embedded in it, that's using OLE.
Yeah. So it's a way you have somebody does a PowerPoint and embeds a video in it, or a sound file, or whatever.
Object linking and embedding. Oh, embedding. Of course, we're sitting here saying embedding.
And embedding. Yes, I said it, and you didn't.
Oh, sorry.
I was answering.
Anyway. Oh, sorry. I was typing.
Yeah. So the first patch that came out a month ago for this, all it did was any file that comes from the internet gets marked as untrusted. So when you try to execute it, it will pop up a warning asking you if you're sure you want to do that, right? Like, if you download a file via Internet Explorer, it marks it, and then when you try to run it, it's like, hey, this came from the internet. Are you sure you want to run it? And that would stop this attack.
Yeah.
However, attackers immediately found ways around that because it wasn't really plugging the hole in OLE. All it was doing was adding this extra prompt to make it not happen automatically. So McAfee Labs has a 2-part blog series where they document bypassing Microsoft patch for the Sandworm 0 day. So they show a couple of different ways they did it. They say, in addition to Microsoft's workaround for the flaw by marking the file as untrusted, it only applies when you try to execute a file. So if you double-click it, it says, hey, this is from the internet. Are you sure you want to do it, or whatever? If you right-click on the file and do open with, or if you do like edit or any of the other actions, it doesn't apply. So if you right-click on the Office doc and go edit, then it doesn't stop you from executing it and you're infected. Or if you just open Office and then go to the open menu in Office and open it, that's not executing it. That's just opening or editing the file, and that doesn't stop the OLE vulnerability. And a bunch of other things like that. McAfee also found samples in the wild that what they would do is actually run the untrusted file as administrator. Right, so they'd set the environment so that it would be the same as right-clicking, going run as administrator instead of just double-clicking the file. Well, that pops up the standard, do you want to run this program as admin UAC thing?
Right.
Unless you have UAC disabled, then it doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
It never actually then does the second prompt of, hey, this file's from the internet. So all the user would get is, are you sure you want to run this administrator? And they're like, well, I just double-clicked it. So if anyone who's ever used Windows, your brain is just automatically clicking yes.
Oh, yeah.
Whenever you double-click on something if it wants to run as administrator, right? That's why that window's a different color than the one that says this is files from the internet is dangerous, or it could be dangerous. So just by fooling you with a different prompt, you would then run the program and get infected. I definitely recommend people check out McAfee's blog post here. They did quite a bit of good research on that.
Yeah.
They have some screenshots and stuff. And you can see what it's trying to do here when you run a slideshow and it makes slides.inf. And then if you run that, it infects your computer. But they also found that, if they did a .zip file and right-click and open it in WinZip or WinRAR, it works fine. Or if they made a Python file and opened it in idle, the Python editor, then, it would cause them to be able to do it without ever running the check.
Yeah, getting the wow, the little, oh my gosh. And of course, so many systems have UAC turned off, especially ones that have old apps they have to stay compatible with. That's probably more common than Microsoft would like. Wow. Well, that's a great Well, really, it feels like it feels more than a two-parter. That is a big patch Tuesday. Christmas came early for Windows admins, Ellen.
Well, especially when there's things, you need to install this thing that normally isn't included in the Windows update cycle first. Right? So EMET doesn't come as part of the Windows update cycle, it seems. And so they couldn't make it just a dependency that, you upgrade. If you have EMET 5.0 installed, upgrade to 5.1. Because, this is just a tack-on thing that only companies install because they need their system to be more secure by default.
It's kind of even more nuanced than that too, because the way Microsoft tags the updates as critical or important or suggested, right? Well, a lot of places
EMET would be optional.
Yeah, something like that, right? I forget what the exact labeling is, but
well, I don't even know if EMET ever shows up in Windows Update because you have to manually go and get it from Microsoft if you want it.
It does show up in WSUS, but a lot of organizations don't deploy those tagged types of patches.
Yes. Only things that are listed as critical because the more things you change, the more risk.
And they'll have an entire setup around that they're going to have to adjust to include this, and they're going to have to push that before they push the critical stuff. It's a mess. All right. So, Alan, something that makes me feel a little bit better, something that sort of gives me that refreshing feeling, that's iX Systems. Head over to ixsystems.com/TechSnap. Go there right now. Check out some of those rigs powered by those Intel Xeon processors. iX Systems are also huge advocates for open source. Yep. And they really build the best servers in the industry, and they have some of the best talent in the industry as well. Alan, I noticed they also just, speaking of some of the best talent, released a new version of FreeNAS, and this looks like it's a beta, so just I'm putting that out there, so I don't know if it's ready for everybody, but updated and revamped web UI.
Yep, they have a new web UI, NFS v4, and a bunch of other stuff, but they specifically made this beta, unlike some of their previous ones, where they'll be sure you'll be able to upgrade from the beta to the release when it comes out, trying to get more people to use it. So if you're starting a new installation, they would really love you to try out the beta.
I'm in. And also ZFS boot environments, what?
So this is if you install an update for your FreeNAS, because they're hoping to be able to get people to update more often. When you install an update, if it doesn't work from the boot menu, you can just select your previous version and roll back instantaneously.
Yeah. See, this was
because it uses ZFS snapshots of the root file system.
If iX Systems did nothing but make FreeNAS, I would still love them. But they do so much more than that, and they're so involved with the community. If you go over to ixsystems.com/TechSnap, check them out. Not only do they have a downloadable comprehensive white paper that might help grease things along up in your corporation to switch over to a better hardware provider, but dig around their whole site. Check out their clients. Look at their What's New page. They're often talking about some of the community events they go to. And it turns out, if you're trying to determine what events maybe you should go to for work or for community or just to connect with the community, just going to their blog and kind of getting a snapshot of what these events are like is worth it alone. So go over to ixsystems.com/TechSnap and check them out.
The other thing, speaking of talent, is they just had a heavy presence at OpenZFS Developer Summit, which was last weekend.
Really?
They Lin Lee that works there gave an overview of how FreeBSD works on with OpenZFS. Basically, they had one for OSV, Linux, Illumos, and FreeBSD. So each different, they had people from each different platform give a presentation about how they use ZFS on their platform and how it's integrated. And then different people talked about a bunch of different topics, including, compression, performance, fast file cloning, which sounds like would be really interesting for virtual machines, and especially with integration with the stuff that FreeNAS already got, which was the integration with the Microsoft and Hyper-V and VMware iSCSI stuff, where you can send special commands. That's instead of, if you want to copy a whole virtual machine over iSCSI, before, without these enhancements, you would have to basically, the virtualizer over here would have to pull the entire virtual machine over the network and then write it back, right? Yeah. To a different iSCSI target. Instead, there's a command it can send saying, hey, copy this from here to here. And then that way, that's done not over the network, so it's faster. Enhancing that kind of stuff. Also, they were working on device removal and a progress update on how that was coming. That's the one where you actually be able to take a device out of a ZFS pool, which a lot of people have been looking for.
That's me. That's definitely me.
They also talked about channel programs, which is doing a whole bunch of ZFS commands as one unit, which is required for a bunch of cool stuff I want to do. And then they had different lightning talks from all the different people working on stuff on ZFS. And then they the second day was all hackathon, and they worked on a bunch of cool stuff. I see here in the notes a poor man's compressed send. So when you're doing a ZFS send, compress the data first so that you're sending less over the internet or just the network or whatever. They have special embedded large block, etc. stuff you can turn on when you're doing a send. They also looked at implementing SHA-512 as a hash, and they also, apparently during the hackathon, they actually implemented Blake2 hash instead of SHA-512 because it's faster and does cool stuff. And they also worked on a SCSI unmap patch, which actually allow you to do the SCSI version of trim, possibly on a ZVol. I'm not sure. They don't. The output is very, or the notes here are very sparse.
They don't have anything on their blog, though, Alan. I was just looking for a post about it, because sometimes they post pictures.
It is. Sorry, if you go... sorry, IX doesn't yet. No.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But if
they might,
open-zfs.org, if you go to the Developer Summit page, has a bunch of stuff they talked about, including making all the ZFS commands be able to output JSON, so that if you want to build tools around it, you can automate and stuff. Like I said, file cloning with implicit indirection, so that would make clone an individual file instead of a whole file system. Bunch of other changes.
That sounds like a conference that was right up your alley.
Implement the ZFS help command. Yeah, if it hadn't been a week after, I would have had to either stay in California for a bunch more days, and it was in San Francisco, not where I was, so I would have had to get from San Jose to San Francisco and stuff. It just didn't work out. Plus, I was not feeling well. So,
but you know what? Your buddies at IX Systems were there. ixsystems.com/TechSnap. And thank you to IX Systems for sponsoring the TechSnap program. And the conference was OpenZFS what?
Dev Summit.
Dev Summit. I'm looking it up. There you go, Alan. Okay, hey, you know what I just noticed? Open-zfs.org. Is that where I go? No, there it is.
Yep.
Hey, so guess what? While we were talking, a wild BSD now appeared. So this could be the point in time. We're at the halfway mark for the TechSnap show. It's a good time to go get your next download started. A man's man. And it's the guy that invented ManDoc, right?
Yes, ManDoc, which is a replacement for Groff, the GNU way of formatting man pages. Cool. He wrote it originally because he was doing math stuff that Groff didn't really do for formulas and stuff, and then he extended it and replaced everything.
Very nice.
It's a very good interview. And he also talked about a bunch of other things, including Mult, which was a more generic way of doing jails for OpenBSD and so on, and a bunch of other interesting stuff he's worked on over the years.
And I'll give a plug to this week's Unfilter 122. We did a huge segment on net neutrality and all of the announcements, from what the FCC had been planning to what Obama's plan is to what Comcast is saying, all of the full spectrum. And our out of the U.S. Viewers also chimed in with what they're worried about and the precedents they're worried about setting, and we covered some of that in the show. Huge coverage, and it sort of kind of begins at the very beginning of the show. So if you're only interested in the net neutrality stuff, you can just watch that, or tune in and watch the whole episode 122 of Unfilter. A lot of crazy net neutrality stuff going on here in the U.S., Alan. You just ignore it all, okay? I found the page. I will put a link to that in the show notes. Okay, Alan. Well, I think the news is all done then, isn't it? We're all...
Yep.
Okay, well then you know what that means. It's time for the TechSnap feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, submitting something to our amazing, brand new, just created it 25 seconds ago subreddit over at techsnap.reddit.com. Alan, I got an email from our buddy Zach over at DuckDuckGo with a little update on how things are going. He says, I think I meant to send this to you a while back, but I forgot about it. We now have an instant answer tutorial. So I've been talking about duckduckhack.com on the TechSnap program, and that's DuckDuckGo's instant answer open source platform where you can go submit a pull request for an answer, where then when folks search DuckDuckGo, your answer will show up in the results to make their search more relevant.
Like, not just in the results, but at the top in like the special area.
Yeah, and now they have a quick start tutorial to get you going, and it's really not that hard, but they really walk you through it. You know, if you don't have a GitHub account yet, they'll show you how to do that. But here, you know, there's so many great things you could do, and this tutorial is a great way to get started. There's also community forums where people are discussing projects they've begun you could check out. Alan, look at this hack. This is a great instant answer that somebody created for sysadmins that maybe are not super comfortable with cron. You can take a cron tab line, paste it into DuckDuckGo's search, and if you append it with cron tab first, it will then translate that line into human readable output. So cron tab **3*** is cron, and then DuckDuckGo says cron will schedule the job at this frequency, 1800 on November 13th, 1800 on November 13th, 2014, and it gives you the output right there at the top of DuckDuckGo. So if I were I don't even think let me check my let me move this, see what my cron, if I even have anything in my cron tab.
No, do you have that example?
My users. Oh yeah, I'll paste it in the IRC if you want to check it out.
If I might have misheard what you said, but it seemed like the example you gave that the answer was wrong.
Here, go check it out while I look to see what my cron tab has in it, because I want to plug mine in there right now. And if you've got a Linux or Unix box handy where you're at, if you do cron tab, you can check out your cron file and then grab a line and put it in DuckDuckGo search. And when you do it, append the beginning of the search with the cron tab command. That's kind of what I think is the cue to DuckDuckGo that this is going to be an instant answer. And that's because somebody submitted that at duckduckhack.com. So go over to duckduckhack.com, see if you've got an idea, see if maybe there's somebody already working on it, or go submit your pull request. And I think if you put in there, you heard about it on TechSnap, they'll even be sure to work with you. So go over there to DuckDuckhack.
The output of this could definitely be improved, so that's a good one for somebody to do via GitHub.
There you go.
So yeah, if you put in cron tab *3***, that means run every minute if the hour is 3. Mm-hmm. Which most people would think that means something different than it does, right? This is a common one that new people would put in, thinking that this will do it every 3 hours or something, when what it really does is run it every minute of the third hour and no other minutes, right? Which is kind of strange. But yeah, so in the output from DuckDuckGo, it says cron tab will schedule this job with a frequency of 3 o'clock on the 14th of November, 3:01 on the 14th of November, and 3:02 on the 14th of November. It doesn't really say that it would repeat every minute, although that'd probably be a little harder to detect without using the full cron parser or something.
But, yeah, and if you did if you had a specific one where it was like on a day or something like that, that would probably be a little easier to read on the output. Yeah, I like this though. Isn't this nice for somebody?
If you don't put in one that's wrong, if you don't put in a cron tab that doesn't make any sense, I'm sure the output makes more sense.
And don't you think though, okay, so somebody that doesn't know how the hell cron works, like you open that up, you see this line, you put in there. Sure. That makes it easier for people to adopt these systems. Like it's kind of a big deal when you can integrate that into the search, and that's what I like about DuckDuckHack. I think that's and the fact that this stuff is it's up there, it's open code. If somebody can go there and tweak the cron tab thing, that's even more awesome.
When Google introduced the sublinks, so when you certain products, if you search for it, then they'd have a separate link to download it. Like it wouldn't be a second search result; it'd be there. They'd have 4 links for it, and it was always like, well, how do I get my website to be treated special like that? And then they started doing the instant answers with Wikipedia. It's why does Google get to decide what comes up there?
No, this is a way better system. And the best part is not only are you helping make search more private because DuckDuckGo isn't the search engine that tracks, but also you're giving more relevant answers that can be continually supported by the community over time, which is a way cooler system. DuckDuckHack.com. Alan, our next email comes in. Now, we have a couple of follow-up items. One that we got a few comments on this one, but I thought Andy's was pretty quick and to the point. He says in TechSnap 187, viewer Oliver wrote in asking about permissions on his Linux home server. He was manually setting the group permission after uploading a file, but wanted a way to automate this process. He says, ACLs and cron jobs, but I said that jokingly, could solve this problem. But I think you guys overlooked the simplest method, the group ID flag on the parent directory. Assuming the parent directory is owned by the desired group, simple chmod g+s on the parent directory will ensure that Oliver's wife could access the files as he uploads them, and vice versa. And it's I thought I actually said that.
No, but
I said the cron thing is a joke.
Yes, well, the cron one would actually work though.
Yeah, it would.
Kind
of hacky.
The problem is his set group ID on the directory doesn't always work. It's particular to individual file systems. I'm actually struggling to find information about it in the man pages for chmod on Linux, and actually the man page for chmod, the command references the chapter 2 chmod for the syscall. But it's actually, there's no man page for it. I don't know. Anyway, the problem is on FreeBSD, there's only set UID for a directory, which will make whoever owns the directory and the directory set UID, any new files will automatically be owned by that user, not the person that actually created the file. However, in order for that to work, you have to use a UFS file system. It doesn't work with ZFS or a bunch of other file systems like NFS, and so on. So it has to be UFS. You have to mount the file system with the special mount set UID dir flag set. So you have to tell the operating system you want this feature enabled, because it's not enabled by default, because that can cause all kinds of weird, there's security implications with the files having their group or owner changed as you write them, right? And the kernel has to be compiled with support for set UID dir enabled in the kernel, which is not by default. So you have to compile a custom kernel, make a file system that's UFS, and then mount it with the mount set UID flag before you could use it all. And so, yeah, this doesn't work with every file system. It'll be very specific to certain file systems.
This was for a bunch of Samba file servers. This was a really handy trick to make sure.
So actually, the set UID thing was specifically put into FreeBSD for Samba file servers.
Yeah. This is how I used it in the past. So that way, like in shared directories and stuff like that, it would be a mess.
There's giant notes about it in the main pages. On a shell server, don't do this. Because you definitely don't want every file you write to be owned by a different user, because then you could just write a set UID file and then run your code as permissions of the person whose file you just wrote to, and so on. So yeah, the set GID might work on some Linux file systems, but doesn't work on every file system. In particular, ZFS is working on a feature for this kind of for a different reason. But where you could set an overlay owner and group for a data set, and then every file and group on that data set would have that owner no matter what. Mostly to save you, when you import backup data, not having to chown every file and actually end up changing your backup data. Where instead you could just import the data set with overridden username and password. Username and group. So, yeah, the set GID might work in some cases, but it's definitely not a be-all, end-all solution.
Not for all, as I had assumed it was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When I heard of this, I was like, oh, that'd be awesome. And I looked into it. I'm like, I see it kind of works with UID, and then it's like, oh, not on ZFS, and not in this case, and a bunch of other things.
Okay.
But actually, depending on the setup on my FreeBSD box, if I, for example, while testing this, I actually went into Rikai's home directory and created a directory and then wrote some files as Alan, they automatically inherited the group from the directory already.
Yeah, I mean, so is that just the default then?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if that's different on Linux. I'd have to play with it more to find out.
Well, if you were like in my home directory and root and created a file, it would be owned by root.
But if I'm in a directory where the owner is Rikai and the group is Rikai, and I write a file, the owner of the file is Alan, but the group on the file is Rikai.
You know what? I could try it right now if you want. I'm gonna try it right now.
Yeah.
All right. So here's my my home directory, and everything is owned by Chris F and users. Okay.
Yep.
And I'll go to root. I'll go to root, so that way, and then I'll just like touch a file. Okay. I'll touch. I'm gonna touch Alan.txt as root. Now, when I created that. Let's see. I guess I probably shouldn't have done all files because that's going to be a mess. Alan.txt is owned by root. Yeah.
I wonder if that's just different.
It would seem to be a difference, Alan. It would seem to be a difference. I mean, that's why...
so that would explain why you don't need the set GID bit on FreeBSD, because that's the default.
Yeah. There you go. We just solved a little cross-operating system mystery. Cousins come together once again. Next, feedback, Alan. Are you ready?
Well, yeah. So, like, here, I just show this.
What do you have?
Paste it in the chat room.
Yeah.
You see, I created an empty directory called new that was group writable, and then I touched Alan.txt, and it's owned by Alan, but the group keeps the original group of the directory.
Yeah.
Which I guess is the same as setting set GID on the directory when you create.
Now, is that going to be different between ZFS and UFS?
I'm not sure, but this in particular was on ZFS.
Okay. There you go. Is that the only way to touch Alan Aspley? All right. Next feedback comes in from Carrie Hartline. He says, and he's given us some of the developer perspective I mentioned earlier. Apple allowing signed enterprise software to be used by anyone is actually a very popular quote-unquote hack in the iOS community for using software that is not in the App Store. I believe this is how Mac Build Server works. I'm very surprised that Apple hasn't closed this, possibly the most popular loophole in iOS. But I think it's either because they use it themselves or they don't realize the security implications of it, which would be more surprising.
More likely, it's too late, and they've already have a bunch of big customers using it, and they're screwed.
Yeah, so this service, Mac Build Server, you connect your GitHub account, you choose a certificate, and then you deploy apps to iPhones. So this is like a commercialized service around this, which is nuts. When you go see how it works, it says build any app from GitHub. You have to have a public GitHub repo, which I don't really have, but it's essentially a 4-step process. They even compile the app remotely in the cloud and then send it to the phone with a link or something. It's amazing. It's pretty wow. So yeah, that's a loophole that a whole industry's been built around. I think that's kind of interesting. Okay, Alan, our next message comes in from Festive Mongoose. That's nice. He says, what's the preferred method or utility for automating ZFS snapshot creation and retention periods? There seems to be many utilities I could use. Just wondering what most people use or what Alan uses for snapshots and any retention advice you have for him,
Alan. The recommended tool is not the one I use, which is ZFS-snapshot-MGMT, but ZFS Tools.
Okay.
The difference with ZFS Tools is that it stores the information about the snapshots or the frequency of what to snapshot and what not to snapshot as ZFS properties on the datasets. So instead of having a config file somewhere that you have to mess with, you can actually just set a property com.sign:auto-snapshot to true or false or whatever on each individual data set, and that controls whether or not it gets snapshotted. And you can set a different policy on each one instead of having to manage this ridiculous YAML config file that I have to do for mine.
Yeah.
So when I asked about this, I mentioned what I used, but for his book, Michael Lucas went and surveyed a bunch of different ones, and he decided this was the best one. And wrote an article in his blog about how it works. And you can see that you can do like ZFS get -t file system all and look for, a certain property and see all the interesting stuff. I suggest ZFS Tools, although ZF Snap is also pretty good because it's written in plain shell as well and doesn't require you installing Ruby or something like
that's appealing.
I had to do.
Yeah. Jed, he's written about his ZFS rig before, and he says just use cron for the snapshots. More interesting is how you divide up your file system so that snapshotting one does not imply snapshotting any others. I have VM file systems with sub-file systems for each VM. I use the tank VMs for general ZFS settings like sync and share SMB attributes, and then I script each of the individual file systems to a snapshot. That way I can roll one VM snapshot independent of any other.
Well, if you do ZFS snapshot without the -r, it only snapshots that file system and doesn't go recursively through all the sub-file systems. So you can easily do that way.
I don't have any idea. I just have ButterFS.
Where do you have Jed's comment?
It's in the subreddit. In the subreddit.
When I look at the subreddit, I only see 2 comments.
Yeah, he's the top one.
All I see is Tubsta and somebody else.
That's Jed.
Oh. That doesn't say Jed on it. Anyway. But yeah, the way he does it is weird.
I think what he's doing, if you read in there, it sounds like what he's more concerned about is...
right. So rather than having one file system with all of VM images on it, he creates a separate data set for each one. Yes, that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
But you can then, if you want, take a snapshot of all of them all at once with the -r flag. So that's also very good.
Word.
But the problem with just using a cron tab to take snapshots all the time is it doesn't clean up the old snapshots. That's why a script like ZFS Snap or ZFS Tools or ZFS Snapshot Management that says, take a snapshot every 15 minutes, which would be a lot of snapshots, but only keep the 15-minute ones for a couple of hours. Or keep only the ones that start on the top of the hour, keep them for 2 days. And then I only need to keep, every 12 hours for a week or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a whole scheme like that. Like my pools get snapshotted every 15 minutes, but I only keep the 15-minute frequency for 3 hours. Then I only keep like an hour for like a day, and then I keep twice a day for for a couple of weeks, and then, once a month after that or something like that.
Wow.
Depending on how much churn there is, because sometimes, the amount of data getting written to the pool just means that I couldn't keep all the snapshots. I'd run out of space.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
For example, like the package set for PCBSD, well, a new one gets uploaded every week.
Yeah.
And that's a couple hundred gigs of data. So if I kept snapshots for months, I would have a lot of data.
Yeah. Yeah. Scale engine problems, that's for sure. That's a scaling problem. Okay. Yusuf writes in, he says, hey, it's Yusuf from Alexandria, Egypt. On a server that has multiple administrators, and I think any of us who've been sysadmins that have had to work in groups before have probably run into this problem, he says, which do you recommend? Setting up a root password known to all admins, or disabling the root password and granting each of the admins full sudo rights? Thanks in advance.
You should never share passwords ever. Specifically, the reason not to is then you can't, if everybody knows the password, then how do you ensure that something was done by a certain person, right? How do you prove that it was Bob that corrupted the server and not Joe?
Not to mention it makes it a pain in the butt when somebody quits.
Exactly. So it's much better to never, ever allow root login directly. Always have them log into their own account, and then they can use sudo or whatever to get around up to root.
Man, I've worked in basically the default in so many places I've gone into is a shared password, and it's shared empty administrator password.
We got rid of the password, and everybody just has their own SSH key for root.
Yeah.
It's like, sure,
yeah.
But everybody's still logging in as root, and I can't tell who is who. Now there is a patch for OpenSSH to make it say which key was used to log in each time. But it's still better if you force each person to log into their own user and then sudo to root.
I would say, too, he was already on the right track. Sudo is so great. Like, not only is it great because you can give people admin rights, but if you if you have like a sudoers file that has like all the example text still in there, notice, too, that you could say, well, this account can get sudo rights for this specific application or specific thing.
Yep.
And that's really where sudo can get...
I did this before. Actually, we use this in a couple of places to allow certain customers to reload their DNS config file. And all they have access, they can edit their file, but not other people's files, and they can cause the reload to happen. Yeah. And that's it. They're not allowed to do anything else.
Yeah. I love it. All right. So we'd like to get your emails. Go ahead.
Probably shouldn't throw in a plug, but I will.
What?
Michael Lucas, who we just mentioned for doing all the research on the ZFS tools, wrote a book called Sudo Mastery, where he actually says, no matter how good you are at sudo, you're probably doing it wrong.
Hey, there you go.
Definitely check out his book. It's available as a DRM-free ebook for $9.99.
And Alan just dropped that link in the show notes as you heard that mechanical keyboard clack away. That was... Right on. Well, okay, now send us your emails. TechSnap@JupiterBroadcasting.com, but probably even easier, just go to the Jupiter Broadcasting page. Click on the contact link at the top of the website. TechSnap's in the drop-down. Fill that in, and then our robots on the back end, they package it all up and they deliver it to the host using magic. It's great. We also have the subreddit, techsnap.reddit.com. A couple of things that are nice about that. I almost always will see that before I see an email, so that's something to consider if you want to get your odds up. Number 2, you'll probably get a fast answer from one of our pretty clever community members, so that's kind of a side perk. And number 4 and 7 and 12 are It's Awesome. I just kind of filled all in there for you. Email's fine too. I will just judge you a little bit, but no, it's fine. It's fine, really. But the subreddit's great. Okay, there we go. That's all the feedback for this episode. So you know what that means. It's time for the TechSnap Roundup. Welcome to the TechSnap Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. How the Roundup are stories that just didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them. Give you some links to follow up on to read even more after the show. And a lot of these links came from our subreddit over at techsnap.reddit.com. I just set that up like 25 seconds ago. techsnap.reddit.com. And Alan, our first one's got my blood boiling. This is coming from the EFF.org website. The Electronic Frontier Foundation is warning us that recently Verizon was caught tampering with customers' TLS email encryption.
Well, was it Verizon? I don't think that's what it actually said, which was actually the part that's been slightly perturbing me about
Here's what they say. They're stripping out the...
Yeah, so Verizon was caught tampering with customers' web requests and injecting a tracking super cookie. Separately, another network tampering threat to user safety has come to light from
see.
other providers.
So you see they're kind of conflating the Verizon part with that is what you mean?
Yeah, so basically they never actually come out and say Verizon was doing this. They say Verizon was doing bad things with super cookies.
Yeah.
Other providers in the US and Thailand were caught stripping the Start TLS flag.
Yeah, I follow.
Which I really blame them for the way they worded it, among other things.
So this super cookie thing too is also, and AT&T was caught doing the same thing as also.
And we've seen other providers doing man-in-the-middle attacks to inject advertising or warnings about downloading files or whatever. So all kinds of evil things.
So this
yes,
ISP, what this ISP is doing is, they say it's a stripping attack, which has gone mostly unnoticed because it tends to be applied at residential network levels.
Right. So the other one, that not Verizon, but they don't actually mention which ISPs in the US and Thailand. So maybe it is Verizon too, but they don't come out and say that.
Like maybe they were trying to imply that, but they can't say it for some reason?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But basically, the way most email encryption works is you connect to the email server like normal, and then in the, you say hello to the email server and it sends back a list of what it supports. One of those is a tag saying start TLS. If your client sees that, your client will be like, oh, yes, I prefer to encrypt it as well. And it sends a start TLS command. And then from that point on, everything on that connection is encrypted with TLS.
But
now the reason they do this is because if they just started speaking encryption right away on that port, all the clients that don't support encryption would choke.
So,
right?
but
because the protocol didn't have encryption originally, it was a problem. Now, the solution a lot of places used before Start TLS came out was to have a different port. Like, right, 25 is the port you use to send email. But then there's 468 or something that you connect on, and that's SMTP, the same protocol, but always over SSL. 465, yes, thank you. So 465 is the same thing, but always over SSL. And then later they came out, well, a lot of firewalls only allow certain ports out, and that port's not on that list or whatever. So people can use the regular port and then start the encryption after they've already made the connection. The problem here is that unlike once you're over an encrypted connection where somebody like your ISP can't modify the packets without being detected, right? That's one of the other things that TLS provides, is making sure your ISP isn't tampering with the packets. But yeah, so basically ISPs were taking out that flag when you were connecting to your email provider. So you connect to Gmail, and Gmail will be like, hey, I support SSL, but your ISP would delete that line out of the response, and you get back a response that says, hey, I'm Gmail, here's all my stuff. And then we say, oh, Gmail doesn't say they support SSL, so let's just keep talking in plain text.
Yeah, auto downgrades.
Yeah. Now, they're not the only people doing it. Apparently, Cisco's PIX and ASA firewalls do this as well, so that they can check that the email you're sending isn't spam. Because apparently spammers were smart enough that they would start, or just the spam email client would just send the email, send the spam encrypted, and so the spam scanner on the firewall couldn't read it.
I hope we find out which ISP it is.
Yeah.
It could be if it's a major one, that could be a bit of a scandal.
Yeah. The post over here at goldenfrog.com says the FCC must prevent ISPs from blocking encryption.
It's interesting.
Notice that he was on an AIO wireless customer, which is a prepaid wireless service that's a subsidiary of AT&T, and was found that his Start TLS stuff was being blocked.
Yeah,
and there was a merger, and yeah.
If I was a skeptical person,
they say they tested it on AT&T's network and it wasn't blocked. So it's entirely possible that it was just this ISP using some firewall product like the Cisco that was stripping it.
Yeah.
And the ISP might not even have realized they were actually stripping it.
Maybe.
But
I find it interesting that it is vague and that it's happening. This was published November 11th, so 2 days ago, the day that President Obama announced his net neutrality stuff.
Right. But in general, basically, the EFF is saying we've been pushing for to shaming all the email providers into making sure that they do provide Start TLS, and then some ISPs are stripping it out now. And then, so, your client isn't encrypting even though the provider's trying to do it.
All right. I got another roundup story for you. Are you ready? This one's golden, Alan. It's golden. The FBI's most wanted cyber criminal used his cat's name as his password when he was arrested in Chicago in his home in 2012 for hacking the website security think tank Stratford. Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So when they went through his stuff, They never knew like how to get on his computer because it was encrypted. They never knew what his password was. Later on, though, it was revealed, so they could get access to his files when the Associated Press did a profile on him, that his password was Chewy123, which was the name of his cat, Chewy. So he added 123 to the end of his cat's name.
Right. Now, if you remember the Stratfor, that was a work of the Anonymous group, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a bunch of amateurs. So, yes, you can see this guy probably shouldn't have been on the FBI's most wanted list.
But you remember that...
It was just...
what was the guy that was running that operation? What was that guy's name? He's in jail now, I think. Started with an A.
No idea.
Oh, come on. We've talked about it on the show before. The guy that ran the Stratford attack. Remember? That he was doing it... Oh, jeez, really?
All we remember was making fun of Stratfor because they were selling open source intelligence as if they had actually had spies or something.
Yeah.
When we covered the Stratfor thing, we were mostly making fun of Stratfor, not the guys that hacked it.
I feel bad. Well, yeah, because the guy that hacked it turned out to be an FBI informant. And he was doing under instruction of the FBI. Remember this?
I don't think that was Stratfor. I think there was some other one.
Okay.
You'd have to go back like 2 years.
It all starts to blur together. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I have to go back and listen to our own back catalog. Okay.
Yeah, good luck with that. You're talking about, a couple hundred hours of ridiculousness.
Okay, so the Mobile Phone to Own 2014 conference just wrapped up. Everybody walked away problem-free. Nobody got hacked.
What? No.
Okay.
They hacked the iPhone 5S, Galaxy S5, Nexus 5, the Amazon Fire, the Nokia Lumina, a bunch of other stuff.
You mean they hacked all the things?
Yes. HP paid out $425,000 in cash and prizes. Started with the successful hack of the iPhone 5S. Members of the South Korean team pwned the device by using a combination of 2 vulnerabilities. They attacked the iPhone S via the Safari web browser and achieved a full sandbox escape. Later, a team from Japan hacked the Galaxy S5 by using a near-field communication attack that triggered a deserialization issue in certain code specific to the Samsung device. Later, the South African team from InfoSecurity managed to break the Galaxy S5 also via NFC. They say NFC was utilized by the UK-based team to hack the LG Nexus 5 as well. A 2-bug exploit targeting near-field communication capabilities of the LG Nexus 5, which is the Google-supported device, demonstrated a way to force Bluetooth pairing between phones. A plot point, as people pointed out, from a TV show called Person of Interest.
Yeah.
So basically they could use NFC to force your phone to link to my phone so I could get data off your phone, which is pretty creepy. They also say that another team used a combination of 3 vulnerabilities to break the web browser on the Amazon Fire phone. On the second day, contestants only managed partial hacks. The French team from Vupen attempted to pwn the browser running the Windows phone on the Nokia Lumina 1520. They managed to exfiltrate the cookie database, but the sandbox prevented them from taking complete control of the system. The team from Estonia used a Wi-Fi attack against the Nexus 5, but failed to elevate privilege, so they only had unprivileged access. All of the exploits were disclosed privately to the affected companies. HP promised to reveal HP promised to reveal details in the upcoming weeks as the patches for those come out.
Yay. Very good.
So good to see white hat type research, paying people to hack on stuff and disclose it privately rather than using the exploits right now. Where
HP paid quite a pretty penny. Hey, Alan, real-time roundup follow-up. Yeah, so his name was Sabu. And he was working for the FBI, and he orchestrated the Stratford hack.
Well, specifically, he had been caught by the FBI and then flipped.
Yeah.
And then,
but it is ironic that the FBI directs the attack on Stratford and then goes and arrests all the people that attack Stratford, and then, all of that's just... And remember how the data got uploaded to an FBI server? This is all starting to come back to me now.
I don't remember that particular part, but anyway.
All right, Alan. He's also on Twitter at he's Anonymous Sabu. The real Sabu on Twitter, if you want to follow him on Twitter. Okay, so Home Depot, huh? Yeah, Home Depot says hackers grabbed 53 million email addresses.
Yeah, in addition to all the credit cards, they also got 53 million email addresses that customers had provided them, which is weird if they only 56 million people's credit cards got stolen and everybody also gave them an email address. That seems a little weird.
Yeah, maybe they had like an auto or something. Yeah, that's weird. That is.
But it might be, I don't know how many people use the Home Depot website, maybe. and a bunch of other stuff. But the more interesting part of the story, other than your email address might have been compromised too, was they gave additional detail about the actual hack.
Oh, that is.
Criminals used a third-party vendor's username and password to enter the perimeter of Home Depot's network.
Well,
the stolen credentials alone didn't provide direct access to the company's point-of-sales devices. However, the hackers acquired elevated privileges that allowed them to navigate portions of Home Depot's network and to deploy their unique custom-built malware on the self-checkout systems and grab those.
Cleverwise in the chat room says Home Depot system asks you during checkout.
Yes. So if you're using the self-checkout, then it asks for your email address, and if you give it that, then
TechSnap pro tip: lie in that field if they require it.
I'm sure a lot of people did, and so they got a lot of bogus email addresses.
I hope so. I hope for their sake.
It's interesting that just like the Target thing, the original entry into the network was a static username and password given to a vendor, which by definition is basically a shared username and password that everybody at that vendor knows in order to get into Home Depot's network.
They then acquired elevated rights that allowed them to navigate portions of Home Depot's network.
So then they did island hopping.
Yeah.
Once they got in the network, they were able to poke around and eventually find a way to get over to the stuff they want.
Custom-built malware on the self-checkout systems in the U.S. and Canada, just like Target.
Yeah. Home Depot has promised to have chip and pin rolled out all over the U.S. before the end of 2014, well in advance of the October 2015 deadline.
So does it frustrate you that... so nobody learned from the Target hack. People didn't go up and shore up their defenses. They didn't go fix up vendor connections. They didn't update endpoint sales software to prevent them from maybe being exposed as kind of attack. You know what? They just probably ran the math and figured it's cheaper just for us to run the risk.
Yeah, but even if they had learned from the attack, I think business moved so slowly that they wouldn't have had changes deployed in time anyway. But yeah. It's too bad that nobody learns from this stuff.
I think maybe I feel a little extra burned because it's been like all of these major ones have been ones that we go to. So
a lot of
people
there are 56 million people who got their credit card stolen, that's like 1 out of every 6 people in the entire United States.
I know, but even like the PF Chang's ones, like select locations, and ours was just awful. Awful.
Right. Well, that's the attackers. You don't hear about it when the attacker targets a mom and pop store and only 100 people get their card stolen.
Yeah, that's true. Alan,
sometimes the banks don't even detect it, and so the store doesn't know they were compromised.
Here's a big story for you.
Home Depot didn't find out they were compromised until law enforcement called them and be like, "Hey, you've been hacked."
Oh, that's right. That's a mess. That's unforgivable. So I don't know if you heard, U.S. weather systems were hacked, and for a few days, all of the weather forecasts were much more accurate. No, that last part's a joke, but
right. So. Yes, I heard because I put it in the roundup.
Okay.
4 of the of NOAA's websites, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the States, and they're responsible. They run a bunch of satellites that keep an eye on the weather and also stuff like ice flows in the Arctic and stuff. 4 of their websites got hacked, and because of that, they had to shut them down. And because of that, a bunch of other places that rely on access to that public information or pay for it, they couldn't access satellite data or ice thickness data. And so a lot of companies that rely on NOAA's website in order to get them access to the feed of information from the satellites to deal with weather stuff meant it was unavailable. I don't know, but I wonder if that affected sites like FlightAware, which overlays the weather on top of the map of the U.S. and Canada for flights, and whether that meant that you couldn't see if the weather was the cause, or if your flight was going to go through bad weather or not, and a bunch of things like that.
I like the line at the bottom of this article, the last sentence. Typically, cybersecurity experts blame Russia for hacks on the nation's infrastructure, or sometimes China. That's literally the last sentence of the article.
Well,
they don't even try anymore. They just throw that in now. It's just like, we don't even need to try to make a connection. Let's just
They didn't try to blame anyone, but typically this is who they'll blame in the end. Because, we saw the same thing with actually the funny. Sorry. I was loading this page about the NOAA hack, and the commercial is for Home Depot.
They might know you've been reading about Home Depot or
that I was talking about them.
Ooh.
And they have an interesting video here about hacking ICS systems.
Yes.
But yeah, the Postal Service one was blamed on China.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very much so.
It's
in the Washington
it's
Post.
like they just toss a coin and decide whether
Yeah.
it's China or Russia they should blame for it.
Well, actually, the Postal Service. Oh, I cannot believe I didn't say this when you were talking about it. So remember how you said they didn't announce it right away? You know when they did announce it, right as President Obama was meeting with the president of China. That's when that hit. As he was going to that economic summit that he was just at last weekend.
Yep.
That's when he was there for a few days, and that's right when they hit that piece. Hey, replay attacks, spoof chip card charges, and TiVo sues for DVR patent violation. No,
what?
No good. Okay, let's try for like a.
I don't know what
you're no fun, anyway. Alan. You're no fun.
Krebs on Security has an article about replay attacks to do spoof chip card charges. So specifically, they found that bad guys in Brazil are using the cards stolen from Home Depot and putting charges through that look like chip and pin charges.
Say what?
However, the bank is like, but we've never issued a chip and pin card to any of our customers.
This is America.
And all of these stolen cards, the transactions coming to us from MasterCard saying it's a verified chip and pin transaction. How the hell is that happening? So it's a very interesting story. They still haven't quite figured it all out. But they're basically finding that they're getting these charges and they're coming through saying that they're chip and pin verified, even though the card that they were using never had a chip on it.
Maybe
and so it couldn't ever possibly be chip and pin.
Here's a good one. Maybe
raising the question is like, well, the whole point of chip and pin was make it harder to clone the card. Why are the bad guys going through the extra effort to make this transaction look like it was chip and pin when the card didn't have a chip, so the bank's not going to require that?
I guess getting ready.
So it kind of raises the question, if the banks bypass a lot of their fraud detection if they see it's a verified chip transaction.
Maybe.
And then the story goes on to talk about a Canadian bank. They don't say which one, but there are only like 5 of them. That was found to not be checking some of the chip and pin stuff. Like there's what's called I lost it here. A cryptogram that goes with that comes from the card and make sure that the chip hasn't been modified.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they weren't checking it. So as long as everything else looked fine, they accepted the transaction without actually checking the cryptogram. So fake charges were getting through. Not because there was something wrong with the chip and pin system, although there are separate problems with chip and pin. The problem was the bank just wasn't checking it properly and was verifying transactions that shouldn't have been valid. Yeah. So it's partly the bank and the merchant systems and the payment gateways aren't actually fully ready for chip and pin. So specifically the US bank that said we've never issued a chip and pin card says also our gateway hasn't been certified by MasterCard yet to do chip and pin. So, MasterCard should have noticed that this wasn't valid, and MasterCard wasn't noticing either. So I definitely recommend you go and read Krebs' article. It probably would have been a top story if we hadn't had so many other top stories this week.
That'd be a good one then for the after show reading. I don't know what to quite make of this next story. This is coming from TechDirt. German spy agency wants to buy zero-day vulnerabilities in order to undermine SSL security. Now, they're getting this from a German newspaper that says that the German spy agency, BND, is looking to spend big money on what it calls its Strategic Technical Initiative, SIT, next year. And it's asking the government for additional funding. We have a little bit here. They say this is a translation, I guess. This is the German edition of the English language site called The Local, which explains this. They say the aim of the program is to penetrate foreign social networks and create an early warning system for cyber attacks. Yeah. Government spokesperson, and I'm not sure how, is Stefan Silbert, I don't know, confirmed to the site on Monday that the BND had worked with French computer security firm Vupin, which is known to sell details of security holes to governments in the past.
Right, and they want a program to penetrate SSL, codename Nitidaza.
Yeah.
It would also target the HTTPS protocol, because that's SSL, which is standard many banks, online shops, webmail providers, and social networks. Holes in SSL need to be patched because it is ubiquitous and everyone depends on it for their security, says the Open Rights Group. There's a real risk that failing to fix problems means criminal gangs will seek to obtain the same data used for the same defects.
Yep. And remember, everybody, it's not evil or mean when it's the West that does it.
Well, specifically, if it's a proper, serious cyber attack, they're not going to be talking about it on social networks.
Yeah, that's the part I don't get either.
It's only like your anonymous people who are recruiting people into their DDoS botnet via Twitter.
I mean, so let's be. I mean, this has got to be like if you're going to go after large social networks, it's got to be Twitter and Facebook, right?
Yeah. If it's the Chinese government that's going to hack you, they're not going to be talking about it on Facebook.
Yeah, that is very strange.
So the entire pretense of their wanting to be able a giant budget to buy stuff from Wupen is bad.
Sounds made up.
But no, it's just made to sound good to justify spending $300 million.
That's what I mean. It doesn't sound like the real
euros,
reason.
which is like $500 million. That's $500 million.
Yeah.
The real question is,
ginned up, maybe.
Does Wupen have a bunch of these vulnerabilities, and how do we get them fixed? And secondly, is the German government doing this because they want to hack stuff, or is this, this is like a...
Someone needs to go bug shame Wupen. Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you'd have to bug shame me an awful lot to talk me out of $500 million.
That's true. So there was a massive crackdown the last couple of weeks on like a lot of like Silk Road 2 and other sites.
Specifically ones that use hidden services on Tor. So the whole point of a hidden service on Tor is the police aren't supposed to be able to find it to shut it down.
But they
how did they do that?
They say at least 27 different sites. Now that number's been contested a lot. There was 410 total .onion pages. So that's you pick the number. The number most of the press is running with is 410 sites, but it's actually 27 sites with 410
you
different...
just had more than one address to get to them.
Exactly.
Because that's how you do it.
Exactly.
So they said that it might have been decloaked via a distributed denial of service attack.
Yeah.
So specifically, we've suspected for a while that the FBI introduced a bunch of nodes to Tor, right? We saw that giant jump in the number of places or nodes in Tor. Then, if you just did a distributed denial of service attack against the, say, Silk Road 2, then you would see all of a sudden this big spike in traffic that would come into the network, go through a bunch of different nodes, and go out different exit nodes, but all end up going to the same place. And if you created... if you doubled the amount of traffic going through Tor, and all of a sudden half the traffic's all going to this one IP address, then by definition, you've decloaked the site. So a bunch of people over at Tor are working on ways to try to combat this way of identifying the sites. And, there's still speculation that this is how they did it, but it seems practical as a way to decloak a site on Tor. If you have the resources to double the amount of traffic and the number of nodes or whatever on Tor, then maybe you can do it.
Yeah, and
right.
People
if the FBI can introduce so many edge nodes on Tor that they control a significant portion of them to be able to see a pattern on the outgoing traffic, then Tor was not really designed to be able to handle a distributed denial of service attack. Yeah. It was really designed to be able to deal with small text transactions and stuff, right? It was never meant for large amounts of data.
Right, and I think... Jeez, I just knocked over my juice. That wasn't me hitting the soundboard down. That was legitimately my juice hit the bell. Okay, yep. All right. So we don't really know. The Tor network had a blog post. The people who run the Tor network had a blog post saying we're looking into this seriously. We're taking this very serious. We think some of it's been overreported. We think some of it though could be genuine vulnerabilities that we have to fix and things like that.
Yes. They also had a post we talked about on BSD Now, talking about the fact that right now too many of the Tor nodes run Linux, and if there was a Linux vulnerability that could cripple the entire Tor network, and they would like more people to fire up Tor nodes on FreeBSD, OpenBSD, Solaris derivatives like Illumos, and so on.
No more monoculture.
Exactly.
Okay, so what do you know about this story? This I don't know. This almost sniffs as an agenda, but it actually sounds about right too. The Gridlock in Action, as Slashdot puts it, retailers demand new regulations to protect customers. So Slashdot says, how bad is the gridlock in DC?
It does seem weird for any company to want to be regulated.
Yeah, they say they want to be regulated for cybersecurity and data protection, but Congress just won't get off their butt.
I can understand that at the same time, if the stores propose the legislation, that won't contain stuff they don't like.
That's true. They want maybe their version instead of somebody else's.
Because, it'll be watered down or have sufficient holes in it. But looking at, it's the National Association of Chain Drug Stores, the National Association of College Stores, the National Association of Convenience Stores, the National Association of Truck Stop Owners. The New Jersey Food Council. the Retail Association of Maine, and a bunch of other places. So these are more groups of retailers rather than individual retailers. Like, I don't see, Walmart or Target on the list. It's more associations of the smaller places, which makes sense as well, right?
Yeah.
They don't have the resources to deal with what the law might come out with. A lot of times when laws put these ridiculous onus on a company to do stuff, they don't really consider the fact that there are small companies. Like, for example, the one I always come back to was years ago, they were talking about making ISPs store everything every user transmits over the internet for like 2 years or something. It's like, well, if I'm a smaller ISP, how am I going to afford, thousands of terabytes of storage to store right every bit of traffic that goes across the network? Right? Sure, if I'm AT&T, I can afford that, but if I'm, mom and pop's DSL provider, I can't. So anyway, that's interesting. They don't seem to have much of a proposal for the legislation, so it'll be interesting to see what happens out of that.
We shall see. Okay, Alan, what's worse than getting hacked? How about a hacker that then manages to acquire your contact information of your customers and emails them that the service is shutting down and the company's been lying about security? That's pretty bad.
Right. Yeah, so BrowserStack, which is a company that provides a browser testing service. Basically, you can fire up a bunch of VMs and connect to them and see what your website looks in a bunch of different browsers, right? So you can try different versions and so on. It's kind of like browsershots.org, except for with more control, where you can actually interact with it instead of just getting a bunch of screenshots back. It says the Mumbai-based company counts among its 25,000 customers big names like Microsoft, jQuery, Xerox, Citrix, GitHub, eBay, Barclays, Adobe, Visa, Lockheed Martin, Bose, MIT, Johnson & Johnson, and Wikipedia. However, the hacker broke in, got the list of customers, and sent the email saying, "Dear BrowserStack user, we are unfortunately displeased to announce that BrowserStack will be shutting down. After much consideration on our part, we realized we were negligent in the service we claimed to offer. In terms of service, we stated the following. After the restoration process is complete, the virtual machines are guaranteed to be tamper-proof. Turns out, not necessarily the case. Machines themselves are in a secure network behind strong firewalls to present the safest environment possible." Well, that's just a bogus claim anyway, because strong firewalls. Yeah. Nobody would deploy a weak firewall.
Not a Linksys.
Firewalls are not magic. And at any given time, you have sole access to a virtual machine. Your testing session cannot be seen or accessed by other users, including BrowserStack administrators. Once you release the virtual machine, it's taken off the grid and restored to its original settings, and your data is destroyed in this process. Unfortunately, we blatantly lied. Not only do all of our administrators have access, but so does the general public. We have no firewalls in place at all, and our password policies are atrocious. Every virtual machine launched are open to the public, accessible to anyone with the alpha password Anakula on port 5901, which is the default port for VNC, which gets scanned by bots all the time. A password which is stored in plain text in every VM in the VNC server that they run in every VM. As well, our infrastructure uses the same root password on every machine, which is stored in plain text on every VM, which is cost-a-coff33. Sorry. It's actually cost a coffee.
Yeah. So they just put the root password in the email.
But, well, apparently it was stored in plain text in every VM, and every customer could have found it just as easily.
Oh my gosh!
Given the propensity for cyber criminals to target infrastructure services such as ours, it is almost certain that all your data has been compromised. These passwords take no less than 15 minutes to find for anyone who bothers to look. We hope we have not caused too much trouble, and our enterprise customers who signed deals contract based on fabrications, we are equally sorry. Sincerely, the BrowserStack team. And BrowserStack's like, we did get hacked, currently sanitizing the entire BrowserStack service, so the service will be down for a while while we do that. And it says the hacker's access is restricted solely to a list of email addresses. I'm like, really? Because that seems unlikely.
Yeah.
Hard time believing that he had so much access, he found all this stuff, got the root password, but only got the list of email addresses. Do they store that separately or something? It's hard to say. And they say, we will post a postmortem after the attack, of the attack later. Currently, our efforts are focused on getting the service back up.
Yeah, I'd like to see a point-by-point response.
Yeah.
Because something in me...
It seems like if every the VNC in every virtual machine was open with the same password. That was obviously an issue. But yeah, basically, if they're snapshot the VM when it was clean, start it up, let you use it, and then roll it back, the password is going to have to be stored in there, and it's going to be the same for every user. So yeah, your session is definitely not private. If anybody else can just VNC in and get view-only mode and watch what you're doing, especially if you say Lockheed Martin and you're doing compatibility testing on your fancy internal security system that nobody else is supposed to be able to know about or see, and things like that, right?
Yeah. All right. Last story in the roundup. We talk about him all the time. We often are covering some of his analysis. Brian Krebs, he's got an interview out. I guess this kind of covers a broad range of stuff, huh, Alan?
Yeah, so it's basically a bunch of questions that he got asked by the people from Open Standards, which is a kind of a blog thing that Mozilla does.
Yeah.
So asking about Spam Nation, his new book, and just generally the world of cybercrime. So, they ask him about black markets and corruption are as old as time, but how does technology change how black markets work? Aren't companies more upfront about things like the Target breach? Or sorry, why aren't companies more upfront when things like the Target breach happen? Why do they always just vaguely tell us stuff and we have to get the information from Krebs, who has to get it from people that were actually working on the project rather than Target spitting stuff out, right?
He also talks about Bitcoin. That's kind of cool. And his book, which is soon. That's probably why I did the interview, is probably to promote the book. Good for him. And it's nice. This is a good write-up, and they link to some of the stuff they talk about. So, like in the questions here, they ask them about particular incidents, and they'll link in the question to stories that they're talking about. So, if you need a little refresher,
cool one they asked is, has any company, organization, or agency ever done a breach correctly?
Yeah,
and he actually points out that Heartland Payment Systems, which was basically a credit card processor for a whole bunch of companies that got hacked, and that was the biggest one ever, 130 million cards. And he said, the CEO came out in front of the media and live just started talking about it and not hiding stuff, and that made everybody feel better about it.
I agree.
And it talks more about that stuff. And he's like, do you think chip and pin will solve everything? It's like, EMV is great. Mag stripes are insane. It's a 40-year-old technology. All the information you need to create a card is then stored on that stripe in plain text. All you need is a $100 reader off eBay, and you can start making your own fake credit cards. And then also, Target is like, oh, well, Brian Krebs, you must be the target of hackers all the time. How do you protect yourself online? So that'd be definitely a good one to read. And they talk about doxing and Bitcoins and living off the grid and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely worth a read.
Mm-hmm. And the link is in the roundup. In fact, everything we talked about is linked in the show notes. Go to jupiterbroadcasting.com, look for TechSnap 188, then just scroll through it. Everything's kind of listed chronologically in the order we talked about it. So that's kind of your guide. Also, while you're there, grab an RSS feed. Then you get the show every single stinking week when it comes out automatically. There's torrent versions as well if you want to help defer some bandwidth. And last but not least, I'll plug that subreddit one more time, techsnap.reddit.com. And it helps us, when you go there, give your comments, your stories, your submissions, your questions. We get an idea of what you guys like to see covered. And, of course, you could always join us live, jblive.tv. We do this show at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC.
Oh, okay. All right. JupiterBroadcasting.com/calendar. Just get it converted to your local time. And you can also add that calendar to your own Google Calendar. There's like an RSS feed. There's some sort of hocus-pocus magic where you can just like have calendar integration. It's something that Google invented, I think. I've been told that by people on the internet. All right. Well, I think that's everything.
You have your phone ping you and be like, hey, don't forget to watch TechSnap.
You could. Yeah, you could if you're crazy. Is there anything else we need to cover today, Alan, or are we ready to get out of here?
No, we got to pick a title.
Well, we do. That's true. All right.
So, show up next week, be in the chat room, and help us pick the title.
Totally. Like, you get to, people suggest titles all throughout the entire show that are here live. And then at the end of a live show, we go to jbtitles.com and people vote. And that's, if you've ever seen a title, you're like, how did they ever come up with that? It's not us. It's the chat room. They come up with it.
Yeah, whereas on BSD Now, our producer comes up with ridiculous titles every week. I don't know how he does it.
Well, I think he uses like some sort of like trance state. I think he has like a room he goes into.
Like just meditates.
It lights some incense and meditates, and he comes up with titles because it's the hardest thing to do out of making a show.
He's done it every week, and they've always been pretty good.
Yeah, I know. That's crazy.
Like the one about last week's episode was about porting the original porting of ZFS to FreeBSD, and the title was "Gift from the Sun,"
I see.
which is like perfect. Mm-hmm. I don't know how he came up with that.
Maybe he has a secret, a dirty secret. The BSD trance is what the chat room calls it. He goes in the BSD trance. That's the place to BSD right there, is the BSD trance. Okay. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSnap. We'll see you right back here next week.